After the confrontation with Chu Qiming, something subtle changed. Not in me, but in the world around me. It was as if a weight had been removed from one side of a scale, causing everything else to tilt. Incidents that should have remained isolated began overlapping. Small disturbances echoed farther than they should have, like ripples crossing paths on water that was no longer calm. I felt it first on campus. I had enrolled in the university under an assumed quietness, choosing a place crowded enough to disappear in. Academic buildings are strange spaces. Thousands of young people gathered together, emotions raw and unstable, ambition and despair constantly colliding. Where yin and yang are meant to balance through movement, stagnation forms easily. The complaints began midway through the semester. Students reported insomnia, sudden panic attacks, an overwhelming sense of being watched in empty hallways. Professors noticed attendance dropping, particularly among female students, living in the older dormitory on the east side of campus. Then came the fainting. Not dramatic, not sudden collapses, just students slumping over desks, drained, pale, waking with no memory of what had happened. I avoided the dorm as long as I could. Avoidance never lasts. The night I finally stepped inside, the smell told me everything. Cold iron, old incense, something improperly sealed. The building had been constructed decades earlier, during a period when the land was hastily reclaimed. No proper rites, no correction of flow. Beneath the foundation, yin had been allowed to pool, and over time it had thickened. What disturbed me wasn't the presence of something unnatural. It was the absence of resistance. The students weren't being attacked, they were being drained, slowly, evenly, without malice. I followed the sensation to the 4th floor, room 417. Inside were 4 girls, all awake, all silent. They sat on their beds, eyes open, breathing shallowly, staring at nothing. At the center of the room, pinned to the underside of a desk with thumbtacks, was a charm made from exam papers folded into a distorted symbol. Blood, menstrual blood, had been used to draw over the ink. This wasn't an entity, it was a ritual, a desperate one. One of the girls had done it. Her name was Liu Shi. I found her in the stairwell shaking. She hadn't meant for it to go this far. She only wanted the pressure to stop. The expectations, the comparisons, the feeling that she was being erased by quieter, smarter, luckier people. Someone had told her the method, an anonymous post, a study charm passed between forums, stripped of warnings, reduced to instructions. Use what you have, feed what listens. Trade exhaustion for relief? She hadn't summoned anything. She had opened a drain. The charm pulled yin from everyone nearby, pooling it into her space, giving her brief clarity, sharp focus, sleepless productivity. Until the building itself began responding, I dismantled the charm carefully. The moment I did, the pressure surged outward, not violently, desperately. The imbalance had grown too large to simply disperse. That night, the campus alarms went off for no reason. Elevators stalled, security cameras flickered. Students woke screaming from the same dream, being pressed flat by something they couldn't see. I stood alone in the courtyard, incense burning uselessly in the wind. This was no longer a single case. This was mass yin imbalance, and I was standing at its center. She appeared without warning, the woman in white. This time she didn't stand behind me. She stood across from me, her feet not touching the ground. "This is what happens," she said, "when balance is interrupted too often." "I didn't create this," I said. "No," she agreed. but you weakened the boundaries that kept it contained. I understood then, breaking formations, redirecting karma, removing seals. Each act, justified on its own, had thinned the Yao membrane holding larger systems in place. I asked the question I had been avoiding since childhood. What happens if I stop? Her gaze was steady. Then someone else intervenes, she said. Less careful, less bound. I swallowed. And if I continue? Then you inherit responsibility. The solution wasn't a ritual, it was architecture. I spent 3 days without sleep, mapping flow paths through the campus, tracing old blueprints, identifying where movement had stalled. I guided administrators, without explanation, to reopen sealed corridors, adjust lighting, change class schedules, break stagnation. At the center of it all, I planted a temporary anchor. Not a seal, a release. The effect wasn't immediate, but by the end of the week, the fainting stopped. The dreams faded. Liu Xi withdrew from school quietly. She never spoke to me again, neither did the others. That was the point. As I left campus for the last time, I felt the presence again, not pressing, not watching, weighing. The woman in white walked beside me, just out of sight. "You're thinking like a custodian now," she said. "I never asked for this," I replied. "No one who matters ever does." She paused. "The imbalance will return," she added, "in other forms, larger spaces." I nodded, because by then I knew the truth. This wasn't about seeing anymore. It wasn't even about survival. It was about containment. And once you become part of containment, you don't get to walk away. After the incident on campus, I stopped pretending that what followed me was external. The disturbances no longer felt like attacks. They felt like consequences unfolding in order, patient, inevitable. Wherever imbalance accumulated, I was drawn toward it, not because I sought it out, but because something older recognized me as a stabilizing point, or a liability. The dreams returned. This time they were not fragmented. I stood in a forest I did not recognize, beneath trees far, older than any I had known. Their roots surfaced like veins through the soil, glowing faintly with residual energy. Incense burned somewhere nearby, though no altar was visible. And she stood there, clearer than ever before. The woman in white no longer concealed her face. She was beautiful in a way that felt deliberate rather than natural, as if her form had been refined over centuries of observation. Her eyes were pale gold, steady, reflecting neither warmth nor cruelty. "You've been asking the wrong question," she said. I didn't speak. I had learned that silence carried more weight with her. "You ask what you are becoming," she continued, "when you should be asking what I was." The forest shifted. I saw it then, not as a vision, but as memory. She had not been born a fox spirit. She had been made one. Long ago, before cities had names, a settlement had been built at the edge of a migratory path, where energy converged naturally, where offerings accumulated year after year. A fox lived there, clever, observant, feeding not on flesh, but on attention, on belief. People prayed to it for fertility, for protection, for luck. And when disasters came, as they always do, someone needed to be blamed. They trapped her, bound her with rites meant for gods, not animals, forced her into a role she had never chosen. Guardian, intercessor, debt holder. "You survived because they needed you," I said. She nodded. "And I endured because obligation creates structure. Generations passed, dynasties fell, but the contracts remained, names forgotten, offerings changed, the fox spirit endured. reshaped by human need and resentment in equal measure. Until my family. Your grandfather found the old boundary, she said. A weak point, a place where my obligations outweighed my freedom. He had been young then, arrogant enough to believe he could negotiate fate. He didn't ask for power. He asked for time. Time to divert what should have claimed his bloodline. Time to spare a child not yet born. He offered you, I said. Yes, she replied calmly. And himself. I felt the weight of it settle in my chest. That was the covenant, I said. Not marriage, not ownership. Correct, she said. You were not promised to me. You were assigned. As a counterweight, a human anchor capable of moving between worlds without collapsing under the strain. I laughed quietly. So high was insurance. Initially, she said. The forest faded, replaced by the familiar emptiness of my room. She stood at the foot of my bed. You have reached the point your grandfather feared, she said. Intervention has accumulated. Boundaries have weakened. Others will follow where you've gone. And you, I asked, I can no longer remain detached. That was the truth beneath everything. Her presence had grown stronger with each conflict. Each choice I made pulled her further into direct involvement. Protection was becoming participation. There is a way to stabilize this, she said, but it requires clarity. She extended her hand. 2 paths unfolded, not visions, but outcomes I could feel. If I refused her entirely, cut incense, dismantle anchors, sever the last remnants of the covenant, my life would shorten dramatically. The pressure I had redirected would rebound unchecked. Others would suffer in my absence. Worse practitioners would fill the vacuum. But I would be free. If I accepted formal alignment, not as property, but as counterpart, I would gain structure, authority, the ability to intervene without destabilizing wider systems. But I would never again be merely human. What does alignment mean? I asked. It means you stop pretending you're incidental, she said. It means you act with intent. And the cost? Her expression softened, not kindly, but honestly. You lose the right to ignorance. I thought of my grandfather, of the fox statue cracked, open on the floor, of Chu Chiming screaming as his sight into the unseen vanished, of the students on campus drained by something they never understood. I don't want worship, I said. I don't offer it, she replied. I don't want command. You will have responsibility, she corrected. Silence stretched between us, then I nodded. I choose alignment, I said. But on my terms? She smiled. That was the first time she ever did. The binding was not ceremonial, no blood, no chance, just acknowledgement. The air shifted, not heavier but ordered. The pressure that had followed me for years settled into something stable. For the first time, I could sense the full perimeter of what surrounded me, where intervention was possible and where it was forbidden. You will still make mistakes, she said. I already have, I replied. She stepped back, her form blurring. Then you are ready. When I woke, the world felt sharper, but quieter. The noise had organized itself, and for the first time since childhood, I knew exactly where I stood, not above fate, not beneath it, but alongside it. Alignment did not bring peace, it brought clarity. Within days, I began to sense fluctuations far beyond individual homes or institutions. The city itself had a rhythm, subtle, layered, held together by routines, infrastructure, belief, and neglect. When one sector faltered, others compensated. When several failed at once, strain accumulated silently, until it could no longer remain invisible. The first reports came through public channels, power outages without storms, traffic lights cycling out of sequence, entire blocks losing cell service at the same time every night, always between 2:11 and 2:17 a.m. Social media labeled it a glitch. I knew better. Energy was pooling beneath the southern district, an old industrial zone repurposed too many times without ever being cleared properly. Factories became apartments, warehouses became shopping centers. What had once been sealed was paved over, not resolved, and something beneath it had begun to wake. I visited the area just before midnight. The streets were crowded, bars open, neon lights flashing, music drowning out subtle warnings. Above ground, the city was alive. Below, it was congested. I felt pressure immediately, a low-frequency hum that resonated through concrete and bone alike. It wasn't hostile, it was crowded. Residual intent, abandoned obligations, forgotten rights, all compressed into too little space. I wasn't alone. She manifested beside me without ceremony. This is what happens when expansion ignores consequence, the fox spirit said. Structures multiply faster than memory. I closed my eyes. The disturbance wasn't singular. It wasn't an entity to confront or a formation to dismantle. It was a systemic imbalance, reinforced by thousands of lives, intersecting daily without pause. We can't seal this, I said. No, she agreed. Sealing would rupture something else. Then we redirect. Publicly? She asked. That was the problem. Any meaningful correction would be visible. People will notice, I said. They already are. The first rupture occurred at dawn. A subway tunnel beneath the district flooded, not with water, but with dense, freezing mist that shut down 3 lines simultaneously. Passengers reported hearing whispers through the intercom system. Video footage leaked within minutes. Then came the hospital incident. An entire wing lost power. Backup generators failed. Patients stabilized only when staff evacuated them into the open air. The media called it coincidence. By the third incident, no one believed that anymore. City officials requested consultations. Engineers were baffled. Infrastructure reports contradicted one another. No single failure explained the pattern. That was when someone leaked my name. Not as a practitioner, as a consultant, as someone who had been unofficially involved in prior localized disturbances. The first reporter appeared outside my building that afternoon. Then another, then a camera crew. You predicted the blackout, one of them said. You warned the university before the dormitory incident. What do you know? I closed the door. Too late. Exposure changes everything. Once observed, systems behave differently. The pressure intensified as attention focused inward. People talked, speculated, feared. Fear feeds imbalance faster than ignorance ever did. I had one window, one intervention, large enough to redistribute the pressure before it turned destructive. We chose the river. The city had grown away from it, treated it as decoration rather than artery. Its banks were reinforced, redirected, constrained. Flow slowed, sediment built up. I worked with civil planners under the guise of emergency mitigation. They thought they were preventing floods. They didn't realize they were restoring circulation. We opened spillways, adjusted schedules, diverted nighttime traffic, small changes layered carefully. At midnight on the 7th day, the city exhaled. Lights flickered but stayed on. The mist receded. The hum faded into background noise, and thousands of people slept through the most significant realignment the city had experienced in decades. The fox spirit watched from the riverbank, her reflection fractured by moving water. "You handled that well," she said. "I didn't fix it," I replied. "I delayed it." "That's all stability ever is," she said. The aftermath was less subtle. Government agencies followed up. Requests became demands. Discretion eroded. I was asked to explain methodologies I couldn't describe without dismantling disbelief entirely. I refused. They framed it as non-compliance. I framed it as containment. One night, as I stood alone in my apartment, every screen turned on at once. News footage, surveillance stills, blurred images of mist-filled tunnels. My silhouette, caught on a street camera, circled in red. Public exposure doesn't come with accusation. It comes with narrative. I felt her presence behind me. "You can step back now," she said. "Disappear. Let others interpret." "And if I don't? Then you become a symbol," she replied. "And symbols attract projection." I thought of my grandfather again, of how carefully he had stayed unseen, how much effort he had spent delaying this exact moment. "I won't explain the unseen," I said, "but I won't deny it either." She inclined her head. "A dangerous middle. It's the only one I know." Outside, the city continued moving, unaware of how close it had come to collapse. For now, balance held. But I knew something had shifted permanently. The unseen had brushed too close to public sight. And once a city begins to notice the cracks in its foundations, it never stops looking down. Containment does not arrive loudly. It comes with paperwork. 3 days after the river realignment, my phone stopped receiving calls. Messages stalled, then vanished. Internet access became intermittent, throttled in ways that felt deliberate rather than technical. On the 4th day, 2 men appeared at my door. They wore no uniforms, no visible insignia. Their identification was brief, precise, and impossible to verify. "We're here to ask a few questions," one of them said. They didn't step inside until I invited them. That detail mattered more than they realized. The room felt smaller with them present. Not because of intimidation, but because the boundaries tightened. Devices hummed softly. Something was recording, even if I couldn't see it. They didn't ask about fox spirits. They didn't ask about rituals. They asked about infrastructure anomalies, predictive modeling, and risk assessment methodologies. "You appear at sites shortly before disruptions occur," the second man said calmly. "How do you identify them?" "I observe patterns," I replied, "the same way engineers do." "That explanation is insufficient. Most truths are." They returned the next day, and the next. Each visit came with more documents, more constraints disguised as cooperation. Requests turned into expectations. Expectations hardened into directives. I was offered a position: consultant, external advisor, temporary clearance. The terms were simple. I would assist quietly. I would not speak publicly. I would not act independently. In return, my activities would be protected from misinterpretation. The fox spirit listened as they spoke through me, through recordings, through observation. "They want ownership without understanding," she said later. "That always ends poorly." "I know," I replied, "but refusal escalates faster." The containment tightened. Cameras appeared in places they hadn't been before. Neighbors changed. The flow of people around my building altered subtly, steering movement away from me. I was not under arrest. I was under management. The first assignment came within a week. A coastal monitoring station had begun reporting hallucinations among staff, repeated sightings of figures emerging from the water at night, equipment malfunctioning in precise intervals. They wanted assessment, not resolution. "Do not intervene," the handler instructed. "Just tell us what it is." That was the line. I went anyway. The site sat on land reclaimed hastily after a storm decades ago. Seawalls built fast, offerings neglected. The dead from that storm had never been acknowledged properly. I saw them immediately. Not ghosts, residual impressions. The station itself acted as a pressure point, forcing memory to surface. I reported it as psychological stress induced by environmental factors, which was true, just not complete. They accepted the report, then they buried it. That was when I understood the real function of containment, not to prevent catastrophe, to manage perception. The next incident tested my limits. A detention facility, newly built, began experiencing synchronized disturbances. Prisoners screaming at the same hour every night. Guards reporting oppressive sensations, dreams of suffocation. The layout was wrong, designed for control, not flow. I told them intervention was necessary. They declined. Too visible, they said. The pressure built. When the rupture came, it was violent. One night, every cell door opened simultaneously. No escape, just chaos. They sealed the facility and blamed a software failure. Then they turned to me. "You didn't warn us," they said. "I did," I replied. That was when silence was no longer optional. They issued a directive: no unsanctioned movement, no independent consultations, no public presence. They didn't threaten me, they threatened access. If I continued acting outside their structure, they would remove my ability to do anything at all, restrict travel, communication, proximity to sites, containment through isolation. I sat alone that night, the weight of it pressing inward. The fox spirit appeared without warning. "They're trying to cage a function," she said, "not you." "Functions can be neutralized," I replied. She looked at me carefully. "Only temporarily." "I can't keep working like this," I said. "Not half blind, not muted." "Then you must choose how silence applies," she said. I didn't understand at first, she explained. There are two kinds of silence, one imposed and one asserted. If I accepted their terms fully, I would become an internal mechanism, useful, constrained, replaceable. If I withdrew entirely, chaos would fill the gap. But there was a third option. I could go silent publicly while acting through indirect influence, architecture, policy shifts, untraceable nudges that required no attribution. Invisible correction. It would be slower, less satisfying, but harder to contain. "I won't give them explanations anymore," I said slowly. "Only outcomes," she nodded. That is how balance survives bureaucracy. The next morning, I signed their agreement and immediately stopped telling them the whole truth. I became quieter, more distant. I stopped appearing at sites before disturbances. Instead, plans changed before sites were built. Routes altered, schedules adjusted, budgets redirected. They thought they had contained me. What they didn't realize was this: silence is not absence. It is repositioning, and as long as imbalance exists, someone will always be listening beneath the noise.